Next up is Amaury Séchet, Bitcoin ABC lead developer. He's going to speak about envisioning the future of Bitcoin Cash. The stage is yours, Amaury.
Well, let's get started then. So I wanted to do that speech to remind people a bit, like what is the project of BCH, why we started that, what is the mission, and what is the vision of what we want to realize, right? Because that informs not only what we have done so far, but also all the items in the roadmap and what we want to build, right? And what are the criteria against which anything needs to be judged going forward. So I believe that for any project to be successful, you need to have some kind of vision that people can rally around and can drive toward. Because if you like that vision, then effectively like the project become a vessel for like pretty much anything, but nobody knows what to expect, nobody knows where it's going. So eventually it becomes something that does a bit of everything and that really don't fit the need of anyone. So the goal of Bitcoin Cash is obviously to be peer-to-peer electronic cash, but I think that's not very clear. That's maybe not the best. That's an accurate statement, but that's maybe not the best communicative statement that we can make about that. So let's unpack a bit what that means. First and foremost, maybe the most important word in there is the word cash. And this is why it's in the name, it's Bitcoin Cash, and this is why it's also in the vision statement, peer-to-peer digital cash. So what does cash means? Well, cash is a form of money. So first we're gonna do a little digression into money, and then more specifically into cash, to know what are the specificities of cash as an implementation of money. Cash is in a way, we don't think of it that way, but it's a technology. It's a technology that allows us to use money, right? So first, money. What is money? Money has been many, many, many different things over the history of mankind, but principally there are two types of money that have been predominant across history, and those are going to be precious metal, such as gold and silver, and those are going to be fiat money, like the US dollar or the euro or the yen. So what makes those things money? Surely they must have some properties that allow us to say, well, this is money, when like a lot of stuff that we have around us is not money, obviously. So money is a tool. It's a technology in a way as well that allows us to do three different things. The first one is to allow for commercial exchange, economic exchange, right? So I can buy stuff, goods, services, whatever, using money, right? So someone is gonna sell me something and I give them money and they give me that thing, and we engage in economic exchange that way. Money is also a store of value, which means that I can keep my money somewhere, anywhere, doesn't matter, and spend it later. I can spend it next week or next month or next year, and it's still expected to have value, preferably a value that is similar to the one I had before. And that is an extremely important property, because without this, there are a ton of economic activity that people cannot be involved into, right? Like you cannot do large-scale projects, for instance. Let's say everybody use chicken as a form of currency. We are in a very primitive society and everybody trades with chicken. Well, a chicken doesn't live for very long, right? So if you need to build like a giant bridge across a river or something like that, it would cost probably millions of chickens, and it's going to be like a huge challenge. Like, like how do you like group a million of chicken, and how can you get them to live long enough? Because by the time you've raised many of them, many are going to be dead, right? And there is like a huge maintenance cost associated to that. You need to feed them, and you need to like space to keep them anyway, right? So chicken are not going to be a very good store of value, and as a result, because they are not a good store of value, you cannot save, and because you cannot save, you cannot have a large amount of money on the side to realize large-scale projects. So when you scale the civilization, at some point you need some kind of store of value. And if we combine those two properties together, the medium of exchange and the store of value, and we think about it, actually deep down, they are very much the same thing, right? That thing is transferring value across time and space. And so money is that thing that I use to transfer value across time and space. And here comes the third property of money. It's a unit of account, meaning it's a way to measure value. So if I buy something, it's going to be a certain amount of money. Where I am, it's going to be euros, but in other places, it's going to be dollar or something else. And some things are more valuable than others, and they have a numeric price. And the more valuable they are, and the higher that price is, right? So that price is effectively like a meter allow us to measure distances. A euro or a dollar allows us to measure value. And so we can compare the value of different things by comparing their price and so on. So those are the three properties of money. And a good form of money to have those three properties needs to, itself fit some criteria. So first, it needs to be fungible, meaning that any unit of money is the same as any other unit of money, right? Otherwise, it cannot be a unit of account. So for instance, 1 meter or 1 second is always the same, no matter, like which meter or which second. It's not even a question that really makes sense, like which second am I talking about? It's not something that is meaning anything, right? So 1 euro or $1 needs to be the same regardless of which specific euro or dollar I'm talking about. And effectively, ideally, this question is even meaningless, right? So you want that to be fungible. And we see that fiat money and precious metal both have very strong fungibility properties. Precious metal, because you can melt it, you can like reshape it in any kind of way. Any single atom of like gold or silver is the same as any other atom of gold or silver. You can shape them in any way. You can take a piece, split it in half, you get 2 smaller pieces. You can then like melt it back into the original piece, and it's all good. So precious metal and fiat money are fungible. Fiat money, obviously, like one coin is the same as another coins. We see that in practice. Even when there is a physicality that is a bit different, we don't care about it in practice. And also a lot of fiat money is just numbers in databases, in banks, and insurance company and stuff like that. And those are like perfectly fungible because they are numbers. So that's one property that is very important. Another property is that it needs to be scarce. So precious metal are scarce, like by the laws of nature, right? There is a certain amount of gold in the world. There is a certain amount of silver in the world. And we cannot make it up out of thin air. We cannot decide tomorrow that there is twice as much gold in circulation. This is just not possible because physics doesn't work that way, right? So there is a set amount of gold, and gold is therefore by definition scarce. Fiat money is not actually scarce. We have central banks that decide how much fiat money is emitted in circulation, and obviously that causes like one of the first problems that we see with those existing form of money, like fiat money not being scarce, means that you need to trust the central bank to not print too much of it. And typically across history, you can see that you can trust the central bank to do that for a few decades, but there is almost always a point at which you come in which the central bank is just not going to do that. And maybe actually with the current event and the current economic situation, we are in one of those times. Right now, central banks are creating a lot of money to try to stimulate the economy that have been damaged by COVID, but also and probably even more by the measure that government have taken to fight against COVID, like closing everything down was extremely economically damaging. And so right now, central banks are printing a lot of money to try to re-stimulate the economy, which means that we're probably going to see a lot of inflation. I see a lot of people these days saying, oh, look, like the stocks are going up and golds and silver are going up and cryptocurrencies are going up. It looks like everything is going up. And yet the economic situation is pretty bad. Like unemployment is also dramatically going up. So how is that possible? Well, it's possible because most of those stuff are not actually going up. The dollar and the euro and all those also fiat currency are going down because so much of it is being printed right now. And this is why everything looks like it's going up. So that's one of the problems with fiat currency. So if we are going to do the next form of cash, meaning the next form of money, we need to fix that problem. But there is there are other property, like we need a predictable emission schedule, and that is different than scarce. It's not just scarce, right? You need it to be scarce, but you need the emission schedule to be predictable. So right now we can look at the price of gold and look at how many mines are profitable at that price and deduce how much gold is going to be emitted in circulation. It's a very predictable number. It's very hard to predict for fiat money. It's very easy for gold, but it has not always been the case in history. So when Spain heavily went into the Americas because there was gold there, they expected to be tremendously rich, by doing so, to accumulate a lot of wealth. But what happened is that they created a supply shock in gold. Like suddenly there was way more gold in circulation than there used to be. And so the price of gold went down dramatically. They created like gold imperial inflation by getting so much of it from America. And so as a result, they didn't get as rich as they expected it to be and created a lot of problems, economical problems at the time. And so you want not only your money to be scarce, but you want the emission schedule to be predictable and set in time as much as possible, hopefully like completely perfectly, even though that's never possible, but as much as possible. Okay, the third property is that you want it to be convenient to use as a medium of exchange, right? So this is where fiat money are better than precious metal, because precious metal is actually not very convenient to use on a day-to-day basis. If I want to buy something using gold, well, if I have a piece of gold that is the right size, then that's good, right? But what if my piece of gold is like slightly too big? Then I have to give that, but like it's not clear what to do with the change, or I need to split a bit of it to make it the right side. But then I have all those small pieces of gold. Plus, gold is very valuable, and so the amount that I would have to transact to buy something that is fairly cheap, let's say I want to buy a sandwich, would be a very small amount of gold, right? And it's not it's not very convenient to deal with things that are that small. However, coins and notes have proven to be extremely convenient to use for people for a very long time. And now we have credit card, and we can have, we can even pay, like without contact and stuff like that. So in Asia, there is a lot of payments through QR codes with smartphones. All of those technology make it very convenient to pay with fiat money. And so we have those two forms of money, and they all have okay characteristics of money for the most part, but all of them have some pretty big blind spot. And precious metal would be the ease of use, whereas fiat money would be the scarcity aspect of it. And as a result, what we see, and it's pretty much the history of every single civilization that has ever lived, is that at the beginning you have a small group of people, and the level of trust in the society is pretty low, and the size of the economic system is also pretty small. And so people can use precious metal. But as the economy grows, as the trust level grows, as well as the economic exchange become more and more complicated, the fact that precious metal are inconvenient to use becomes a burden on the economy and becomes something that prevents the society from growing more. And so you see those societies switching from precious metal to fiat money. And it allows them to grow much bigger. You see, for a while, the civilization flourishes. It allows to do a lot of great stuff. But then, like at some point, the central bank does something bad, the value of the money collapses, and it's over, and you press the reset button, and you start from the start with like much smaller community that use much stronger form of money, and you do it again and again and again. And that's pretty much the history of every single civilization that is tied to the history of money. So if we're going to create a new form of money, we want that form of money to be scarce. And this is the case for Bitcoin and any kind of derivative of Bitcoin, right? Like this is a form of money that has 21 million units, and that's it. This is scarce, right? So you want it to be scarce. So if you can do that, you are doing better than fiat money. You want it to be obviously like all the other things we've talked about that all form of money are doing well, but you also want it to be very convenient to use, which precious metal, this is where they fail, right? So you want to be able to send money to anyone in the world very easily through electronic means. Like we have the internet right now. We can send an email to anyone at any time, anywhere in the world. And you'd expect money to kind of be the same, right? Like we have those electronics means to communicate with anyone in the world. We should be able to do so and send them money. So that would be like the ideal form of money. It would be scarce. It would be fungible. It would be predictable in terms of emission, and it would be very convenient to use. And this is the first aspect of what we are trying to achieve, right? Good money. But we just not use the term money, right? It's not Bitcoin money that we're doing as Bitcoin Cash. We want to be peer-to-peer electronic cash. And so what is cash? Cash is a technology, an implementation of money, right? And the most common instantiation of that technology is using coins and notes to exchange value. But that's not, deep down, that's not the nature of cash. The nature of cash is that it's a form of money that you can transact from one person to another without involving any third party, right? So if I'm buying something for cash, there is only me and the merchant from which I'm buying that are involved in that transactions. And this is what cash allows me to do. And something that we have lost maybe, and we don't quite realize it, is that when you use any electronic form of money, but Bitcoins and some other cryptocurrencies, you effectively always have a third party. So if you are using your credit card, you are using Visa, you are using MasterCard, or you are using, some other system, but those two are the main ones. And you are gonna connect to their system, and their system are gonna connect to your bank and connect to the bank of the merchant and process the transaction. So you have a lot of parties that are involved into making that transaction. It's not just you and the merchant. It's you and the merchant and Visa and MasterCard and your merchant's bank and your bank. And if you're abroad, it's 7 more people, because now you need to convert the money into the local currency and go through like several banks to do so. So that can be a very, very complicated process. But more importantly, any one of those intermediaries takes a cut. So it's expensive. Something that people don't quite realize, right? But merchant knows the credit card fees are not free. They pay a few percent on every transactions. And well, those few percent, it really depends on the line of business you're in. But if you are in a high volume, low margin kind of business, a few percent is huge. It's absolutely huge. And so for some businesses, this is a lot of money that are going in fees for banks and credit cards and stuff like that. But maybe even more importantly, any of those parties can choose to not cooperate and not process the transaction, in which case the money doesn't go through. And that happens on a regular basis. When anyone travels, for instance, that's a very typical case. If you travel and you try to use your credit card abroad, sometimes the bank is suspicious that maybe your credit card was stolen by someone who's abroad and trying to use it. And so they're gonna block your credit card and request yourself that you call them and confirm that it was actually you. This is something that happened on a very regular basis. And if you're at the other side of the globe, you need to call them at 4 a.m. because this is when they're open to get your card unlocked. And if you don't have money, right? This kind of stuff is very common, more common than maybe people expect. I don't know, but almost everybody has some experience like that they can relate to. And so it's quite important that those third parties are not involved. And right now I've talked just about the inconvenience, which maybe are what most people have experienced in their life. But it also means that if you are like a political dissident or something like that, maybe those systems may refuse to process payment to you, and now you find yourself economically isolated. It happens to WikiLeaks a few years ago, right? When Visa and MasterCard and PayPal and various other companies decided to not process payments to WikiLeaks, as a result of which WikiLeaks started accepting cryptocurrency because there is no third party involved. So a political dissident, but there's also a privacy aspect of that, right? Like you may not want your bank to know everything that you do and everything that you buy, but effectively right now your bank knows that. And people are very concerned about Facebook and Google and those big companies knowing a lot about you. And this is true that they know a lot about you, and this is true that this is maybe a question we want to ask ourselves. But personally, I'm even more worried about Visa and MasterCard because first, they probably have more users than Facebook and Google. I know many people that are not very computer savvy, that don't use those services like Facebook very often, and yet they have a credit card, right? So Visa and MasterCard know stuff about them that Google or Facebook doesn't. But maybe even more, what Facebook knows about you is what you like, who your friends are, and this kind of stuff. What Google is like what you're searching for, but what they know is what you value. And so that's probably even a higher signal, right? Like it's like what you buy and where you buy it and this kind of stuff. So that's a huge privacy problem. And you see that becoming very important for what people call gray markets. So gray markets are markets that are not illegal per se, like not black markets, but still people don't really want their involvement into those markets to be known, right? So for instance, pornography is a good example of that, or anything sexual in general would be a good example of that. Like people really don't want to have their sexual preference to be revealed to the world, and yet there is a lot of money in sexual industry in general, and so those are gray markets where people value their privacy. And until recently, there was like zero technology that existed to do something like cash, but electronically. That did not exist, until 10 years ago. And this is why cash is so important here. We are moving full steam ahead into the cyberspace space. Everything becomes digitized, everything becomes electronic. And as we do so, we are creating a panopticon where a company like Visa and MasterCard effectively has total economic control over individuals and even many large companies or institutions. And this is a threat to the freedom of mankind as a whole in general, right? And it's very important that people can involve in economic transactions freely with each other, in terms that they both consent to without the third party being concerned by those terms. And so this is tremendously important, maybe no more than ever, that not only we have sound money, like I talked about, but that we have digital cash, electronic digital cash. And so that leaves us to what are the important value of Bitcoin Cash. And those fits into two main buckets. One is the media of exchange, cash-like kind of properties. So you need to be able to send money from one user to another user directly without any third party being involved. And you need to do so in a way that is fast and convenient and cheap and reliable. And if you do that, then that's success. And on the other side, you also want to be a good form of money. Obviously, if you want to be a good form of cash, you need to be a good form of money. So you want it to be scarce, and you want the emission schedule to be predictable to conserve those hard money property. And lastly, you want it to be fungible as much as possible. And with all of that, I think I reiterated what we're actually building here. I hope this can serve as a reference for people who want to join the project, or people who are wondering what are not the day-to-day stuff that is happening, not is what is the technology that we're deploying right now, what is the work that is being done by whoever in the space right now, but what is the underlying driving vision for all of that. And that is it. And I hope I made a good case for it.
Excellent. Yes, I think so. So do we have any questions for Amaury? Any questions in the chat? I think it was a very complete talk, very well-made points. So also we're kind of right in between, I think, the end of Europe and the beginning of the Americas. So
yeah. Yeah, I've seen during the various chat, a lot of people were, there was a lot of people, coming and leaving due to time zones. So I don't know where people are right now, but hopefully everything is recorded anyway, and this is going to be served going forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Here we go. Here's a question. Virgin coins, newly mined, are traded at a higher value. Are they still fungible?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and not quite, right? That's the answer here. It means that cryptocurrency like Bitcoin are not 100% fungible. They are close to that, but not 100%. And in the same way, you have coins that are, coins that have been emitted certain year, or that have a specific design or whatnot. Sometimes, have a value that is higher than the nominal value that is on the coin, because some people collect them because they have some properties. So sometimes you have gotcha into existing form of money where the fungibility aspect of it is a bit broken, and that is the case for new coins. That is the case as well for sometime, there is a heist or something that happens, and some coins becomes what we call tainted, because we know that in some way they are associated with the coin with those heists, and maybe some exchange are not going to accept them. So that's another case where fungibility is a bit broken. Hopefully there are technologies to mix those coins, and so that would solve that aspect of it. The aspect for new coins, I'm not quite sure that this is solvable. In any case, that's a gift to miners, I guess. That's good for miners. Yeah, that's not ideal for the money property, but that's close enough, I guess. For the most part, we see that in practice. For the most part, coins are fungible.
So how do they get a higher value for those freshly mined coins? Do they trade them OTC or?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
You can. There is a demand for freshly minted coin. There are people who want to buy freshly minted coin, and because they want this specific type of coin, they are usually willing to put higher price tag on them.
So what about redlining? I mean, because of the ledger is fairly transparent, isn't it aren't we going to see a situation in the future where, for example, a U.S. government agency is going to say, this address is redlined, and that's, even though that doesn't change anything on the blockchain, it can change people's behavior.
Yeah, so that's another case that I was, talking about. Sometimes some people know that some coins have some property, and they want to, blacklist them or something. And the solution to that kind of stuff is, I'd say it's mixing. Like you want to have those coins moving around and mixing them, and at some point they are associated with so many other coins that either you ban everybody or